I've got a very special guest today on Sonic Dorms. Second I caught your music I mean, I don't know if you know this, but what I like to do, my method, my ideology is going on Instagram and various other platforms and seeking out artists anyway. Kind of like it, probably like an A&R person would have done back in the
Okay.
day. You kind of go into clubs and you kind of listen to people and you see what catches your attention. And Whitney Tai is my special guest today. You're someone who grabbed my attention just from your ethereal sounding music and vocal ability. And so, welcome to Sonic Dorms. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with me.
I really appreciate you having me here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, there's the something that caught my ear was the song "Not Have Each Other"
Mm,
off the Apogee album. That song in particular really was like the gateway into the world that you've created, the sonic,
yeah.
soundscapes that you've created with your music, and it really just went from there. But there's one thing that I like to ask all artists when they first come on, the first time artists, and that's the origin story. Because to me, those are the building blocks to where you are today. To me, that's what really where it all began, right? The origin story.
Yeah.
So, if you wouldn't mind sharing with me how it all started for you.
Well, it's funny because Not Have Each Other was actually probably the first song that was officially written for the record. Like I think a year prior I started working on Scolded. That was like the first ideation of Apogee. But then when I moved out of New York and I went to the West Coast, I was living in Portland, Oregon for a little while, and I just needed a break. I've been living in New York for my entire life. I was burnt out from my career path that I was going on, and I just wanted to make new friends and live in a new city and experience the culture and the arts. And I had this adorable little apartment that I had found on in Northwest Portland, and it was like right in the mecca of like the town. So it's like there was all the artists, there was cafes, there was like people doing live paintings locally. So it was like there was a lot of stuff going on, and it was exciting as like being a new person in a new city, having no connection to this place whatsoever, and just kind of building a story of my own. And I had bought this really cool Korg mini log synthesizer, and I set up my apartment like really cozy, nice lighting. And I remember one night I got home from this little tea shop that I used to go to all the time, and I had this idea in my head for like a bass line. And I came home and I was playing, and then I came up with a hook, and that was where it started. The hook for Not Have Each Other. And what was ironic about that song is that a big part of the reason why I left New York was that I was getting over not just like family like things that were stressful, but also like relationship stuff that was making me sick. So getting away from toxic people. And so the line in the chorus is like, even if we had everything to lose and even if we had everything to gain, we'd still not have each other, because it's just this, no matter what we do, we're never going to make this okay. And we just have to walk our separate ways and do our own thing. And that's okay. Sometimes it's okay to walk away and admit or agree to disagree that it's not going to work out. And that was sort of where that spawned from.
Yeah, fantastic song. I don't want to take away from what you were saying, but
No.
or sidetrack, but the saxophone on there is
Yeah.
incredible. It's not often that you hear a saxophone in modern produced pop, let's just call it pop music, even though to me
Yeah.
you're doing something else, but stuff with hook that's hooky and has that sort of production value to it. To hear a
Yeah.
saxophone in that is kind of a rarity in the
Yeah.
last 10 years, let's say. So people kind of see it almost like a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. That nobody really takes it seriously unless you're in that world of jazz music, really. But it's
Yeah.
cool to
Yeah.
hear that. It kind of adds a different flavor from, say, hearing a guitar solo in a song like that.
Yes. I feel like it's a harkening back to the 80s as well, because I mean back in the 80s and like late 80s when they were doing a lot of the synthesizer pop anthems, like you would see that prevalent there. And so taking a very modern sort of like new wavy synth wave sort of shell and then shoving something that's kind of retro into that, I think it reminds people of something they're not, they maybe they can't put their finger on what that thing is, but it has that nostalgia. And I don't know if you know the project M83, but they do that often. They're an electronic project, but they often throw the sax in there, which I think is really cool. And their music is different than mine, but it works because they've got this very atmospheric electronic bed, and then when you put a very natural instrument into that, that is so like round and brassy and honky, it's like it makes it quirky, you know. And I think it plays into some of the other quirkiness on the record as well.
Yeah, the juxtaposition in like their biggest known song, I think, from a general standpoint, is Midnight City, and in that year,
Yes.
saxophone is like it juxtaposed to, like you said, the electronic bed so
Yeah.
of music. So I think that's wonderful. But going back to what you were saying about being in Portland, deciding to take actions into your own hands and actually like going out of your way to change the course of your career. um what was going on with you? I know this is an important topic for all artists out there, especially nowadays, because things are so rough now, more than ever, as far as like trying to get out there in the world. I think it's an important lesson and story to tell, as far as like the authenticity that you carry in taking that sort of action, and just going for it, and just kind of just saying, well, let's see what happens, because that's, to me, that shows a sign of somebody who just has, like, it's not even a want, it's a necessity for
Yeah.
artistic expression. And to see you make that move all of a sudden, when you thought you had maybe your life together, suddenly like, no, this isn't really for me, I'm going to explore music as a career
Yeah.
choice. So if you wouldn't mind diving more into that and that evolution in your storyline.
It almost is like I just kept listening to my gut. You know, I'm very much a advocate of following your gut, listening to the inner monologue that you maybe sometimes want to shut up because you're scared of what that might mean for you, or for what it, if there's no guarantee of the ending. But I think that also plays into how you're able to step past that threshold of, you know, is what is holding me back from the thing that I love the most? Is it comforts? Is it money? Is it my self-image to everybody else? Or is who I am in this moment even me? Or is this the me that everyone's created and that I've absorbed over all these years? And I think for me, it was realizing that I am not this person that I was believed to be, that I needed to redefine myself as under my own terms, in my own time, in my own way. And I think that allows you to make decisions you might not normally make, because you need, like, to find true joy, and not just happiness but joy, where you're literally pulling from that deepest part of yourself to make choices, even if the results could be difficult. If you could fall out of financially, you could run into the wrong crowds, but none of that really matters, because that's all part of life. That's all part of the process of making choices and taking a risk and jumping into the dark waters. You have to be able to say, fuck the results of what might happen. What matters is I got to be true to myself. And that was enough for me. That was enough, because I'd been pushed to a limit already, where I didn't want to keep feeding into this other version of what society and construct was telling me that I had to be. So I would say the same to anyone else. If you feel trapped, or if you feel like you can't see past your own head, it's probably because it's not your fault. It's because we've been conditioned this way. And when you break free of that chain, it doesn't get easier, but it definitely gets more real and more true, you know?
You had already a talent though, because this stuff doesn't just magically appear. I'm sure before you made the choice, there was something there that you had at some point early on in your life. Where did that come from necessarily? Was that something that just you were born with, or was something that, like, did music gravitate to you early on, or like when did you realize you had some form of talent, whether it be with your form of writing lyrics and melody and poetry, or your vocal ability? Where did you realize that that was there?
Always,
Yeah.
always. Since I was really young, my parents knew, I knew. Uh, you know, my dad was both of my parents were big advocates of me being a musician. They wanted that for me. And I think because they saw that, I mean, it's not every day where you have a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old singing in the shower and sounding like, like, oh my God, like this kid, this kid can sing, it's, and when you realize that as a parent, that's probably an exciting thing for any parent to see that their child has like an affliction for something, like, or if you have a child that just plays piano magically, like from a very small age, it's just, and I think because they are appreciators of the arts and music themselves, it was only natural for them to encourage me to do that. But when I was young, I feel like because of how strange my childhood was, I lost my mother at a very young age, and I was forced to have to be an adult at a very young age. And I think I got diverted for a little while because I had to take care of my mental health. I had to take on jobs that could actually make me money because I was living with a single parent. So I had to kind of just figure out life on my own almost until I was ready to do the thing that I didn't get the early start in. And I hope that inspires other artists too. Like, it's okay if you don't get an early start in something. It doesn't mean you can't do it still. And I beat myself up about that for a while. I was like, oh man, I'm going into this too late. Like, it's, I should have started 10 years ago. Like, but I wouldn't be able to say the things I'm saying in my music now if I had started earlier. It's like everything is at the right time and there's no wrong time. It's just you create the time that's right yourself. And so I'm grateful to my parents for opening that door and saying, here, we know you want to be this thing and it's okay. But you can do whatever you want. You're an artist. You're a free person. Pick what you want to do. And I loved so many things as a child. I was a dancer. I was a skater. I was a writer, and I had many passions. So I was never poor in spirit when it came to like having things to inspire myself. So music was just going to eventually come back around. It was unavoidable. But going to college in the city and being a designer for like a long time, that really affected me as becoming a musician because it gave me the tools and the language to communicate in a way that was more abstract. It was able to let me dig deeper into my artistic ideas.
So in a way, it was all meant to be, really, the fact that you took on that trajectory, and you went on that path for a little while, and you kind of came back with like a heightened perspective on
Yeah.
your love for music and music
Mm.
craft. And I think your story again is very inspiring even to someone like myself, because I also was somebody who's like, am I too late to the party with what I felt I always needed to do, but maybe felt like a little conflicted at times because other things took priority at said time. But
Yep.
and there's other artists out there. I know it's a weird time right now for musicians and artists to find their way in this crazy world, just because everything's just so oversaturated now. So I think it's awesome to there's something that I gravitate towards, and I think everybody does when they listen to music, is authenticity, and that's something that you bring to the table. But that's something that I feel, um, when it comes to that inspiration, had to have come from someone or somewhere outside of yourself. So were there records that early on, or singers in particular, that you gravitated towards as an artist?
For sure. I almost too many to put down the list, but it's I think my earliest influences were, I want to say 70s, like a lot of 70s Motown, um, a lot of British rock. My dad had a very interesting CD collection in my house growing up, and so it ranged anywhere from the Beatles to Fleetwood Mac to Stevie Wonder to Sting, the Police. That was the stuff that Pink Floyd and Jethro Tull. Like I have like a very eclectic base start. I was a big Michael Jackson fan when I was really little. I used to try to like dance like him and listen to the way he intonates and does his vocals when he sing. Sarah McLachlan and Celine Dion were big vocal influences for me. More so not stylistically, but more so for tone, because I really loved how each of them were so different, but they were able to command emotions with their voice. It wasn't even about the genre. I think my fascination with music or artists growing up wasn't like always, oh, I can appreciate this song objectively, even if it's not what I'm what I would listen to in my own time, but I'm trying to pull something else from what you're feeding me. It's like whether it's your emotional performance or if it's your the way you put words together. It's just like you pull little nuggets from where you can, and you use that all as like part of the ingredients to help you learn how to express yourself.
Yeah, I think it's cool here that I mean, I can hear it in your vocal. I hear a lot of different things coming together, and yet you make it uniquely your own. And I think that's another thing to take away from it, is the fact that we can all be inspired and influenced from all these different things and all these different factors and what we intake. But the fact that you still have your own identity, to me, that is immediate, because the second I hear your work, it's very distinctive, I think. And I think that that's another thing that I personally I look for, are artists that have an identity that is like unique to themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I,
what, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, I think we, in order to communicate with other people, we have to find our own voice. We can't be replicas of everybody else. I mean, there's only one Prince. There's only one, there's only one David Bowie. Like that, you can't. And the reason why is because they didn't give a shit what other people thought. They wanted to say something, and that's what artists need to do today. And there's a lot of pressure not to do that because they want to keep, it's like, the little stamps that you stamp on a letter. It's just they want to keep making the same sort of thing, replicate, because it sells. It's all about the money now, and it's not so much about the art anymore. But I really do feel that we're headed towards another renaissance of sorts. We can't keep going this route.
Yeah, it feels like there was a point in time, for the longest of times, where like artistry and commerce were united to a degree, and you had your so-called pop music, which, but there was room for the artistry
Yes.
to come in and also take reign in the pop charts. And I
Yep.
think like we've lost that in the last, I don't know, decade and a half. Is that,
Yep.
well, why can't we have this song from this genre from this artist on the pop charts anymore? Why is it only exclusive to this club of people? And I think it's important that we continue to preach and promote and talk about artists that we love, and create platforms for artists that we love that maybe aren't getting all the attention that I feel, or we can all feel, that they rightfully deserve, so that eventually things can turn around, because I do believe that, like as you mentioned, there is a renaissance looming
Yeah,
somewhere in the horizon, right?
I agree.
So, Metamorphosis, which was your debut record, came out in 2015, I believe. What was the journey to finally getting that launched?
um at the time, I was in a really strange place. I had moved out of my parents' house, and I was living with my grandpa and my grandma, and I was trying to get away from some of the, the trauma of, growing up with a father who, he's a good man, but he had his own struggles. Losing your wife is not easy, and he had some bouts with alcohol and things like that. And I think we were not able to see eye to eye, just because I felt like I had to be more of a parent, and I think that that was conflicting with the parent themselves. So you just have to be responsible when things fall apart, and I kind of, I have that quality of like wanting to hold shit together when things fall apart, and I'm very headstrong when it comes to taking care of people and my ideas. And I think that we just bumped heads. We weren't compatible as like a family at that time, and my grandparents were like the warmest people, and they made me feel very seen and loved. And sometimes people just can't offer you things at certain times in their life, and it doesn't mean they're a bad person, or that it's just, we all go through our own anxieties and troubles and everything. And I think we have to do what's best for the other person and for ourselves. And the best decision at that time was to just get away. My father and I had struggled for years with the trauma of the loss of my mom. So I think that that took a toll on the family in general. And when I lived with my grandparents, they were they were people that allowed me to be a design student in college and come home as late as I want and go out as early as I want and just be an artist. And I didn't have to answer to anybody, and it's like I felt free, and that was something I needed because that's just the way I am. I'm like a wanderlust. I need to be able to go and do and see and not be questioned about why. It's like you just want that freedom. And it doesn't mean I was nuts or anything. I wasn't like out like partying till like 4 in the morning or anything, but it was like I just loved that they allowed me to just run and roam because they saw that I had never really had that in the other situation I was in. And I was a good kid, I had good grades. I worked really hard. I've always loved school, like I loved to study and read, and I love writing. Um and in college is where I met people who reintroduced me towards music again. People were starting to encourage me to go back into music. And then I met some friends when I started working that encouraged me to go back into music and kept pushing me. And it's because of one of those friends that pushed me towards my producer, Tim, who wrote Metamorphosis and Apogee with me. And when we did our first single together, which was To Be Loved, that was like, I wrote that as a ballad. It was like a love song. And then he turned it into like a really cool, fun electro pop track, which I thought was cool because like the lyrics are so sad, but then like you contrast it with like the fun dance, and it actually enlivens it's just the contradiction makes it fun, more of a fun experience. And I thought that was cool. And I was like, wow, he really has a nice sensibility of, how to take something painful and turn it into something beautiful. And that was like the spawn of why I wanted to make Metamorphosis with him, because he's like, I would send him demos. I would send him like little recordings of me singing lyrics and melodies, and he would understand what I needed, and he would send me back ideas, and I was like, this is exactly what I want. This is the vibe. This is, you get me, and I think that was when the light turned on, and I was like, okay, we're going to do a record together. And that ended up being Metamorphosis. And it was around the time when my grandfather was dying. So it was very difficult because it was just him and I left at that point. And I was putting out a record. I was chasing my dreams, and my grandfather was telling me, he's like, I don't want you to stop what you're doing, even though I'm going through this. And, I know you love this. And so he kept encouraging me to put the record out and finish the record. And he couldn't wait to see me perform live, which sadly he never got to make it around to that. But he was one of my biggest fans. And I think having your best friend as your fan and your encourager and your cheerleader is what I needed. It was the healing that I needed, that, the universe gives you things when you put good things into it, so he was my little miracle getting me through my first record. so
And then following that up, was that a difficult thing for you to do, or did you have a concrete plan in your head how you're going to follow up your debut record?
I had no idea, honestly. I didn't even, I really just made that record because I needed to. I didn't have a plan at that time. I was so new in the industry. I just wanted to say something beautiful, and hopefully it connected to somebody else who might have been going through a similar thing. And it wasn't until after I released that record that, I started to get a response from various people and different platforms who loved the music. It took a little time because back then it was harder to get attention because there's social media was like in 2015, I would say, like that's when Instagram was starting to pop off more. It was starting to get bigger, and then you could kind of promote things. And I used to send emails out, and I was trying to just raise awareness about my project. And I was just having fun at that time. It was more fun because I had finally made a body of work, and I never thought I was going to do that. But it's all because of the steps that I took and the people I met. Without choosing that first career path and meeting those people and working in those places I worked, it would have never led me there. So it was all kismet in a way. And I was really enjoying that kismet feeling of like, I'm here, I've arrived. I finally did it. My mother would be proud. My dad is, he's a hot mess crying over it because he loved singing with me when I was a kid. We used to sing songs every single night, and his dream was for me to, I guess, do what he never got to do, which was to, because he had bands, he was in bands, but like, I don't know if they ever took it seriously. They just did it because they loved music. But yeah, I don't know. It's funny how things come together when you don't when you put the love foot forward and not so much the expectation foot forward.
Yeah, I think that's something that comes across in your music is the earnestness in your voice and how real it all sounds and feels. But that follow up record, which is your latest record, Apogee, it was released a couple years ago. Was that was obviously released like just as or had COVID already been a thing when that was released, or
We released that album a few months after COVID
yeah,
happened. So it was like we were slated to release in June of 2020, and then we locked down in, what is it, March, April. And I was like, "Ah, I can't hold the record back now. Like I've been working on this record with my producer for 2 years. Like I was like, I need to let this go. And it's kind of sucked that it couldn't tour at the time. It's not to say I won't tour that album. I think if anything, with my new record that I'm working on, I might even double up and do like a Apogee / whatever my next record title is, tour. So like, it's just that I guess I had a gut feeling again that that album represented for me that redefinition of myself, and I wanted people to have it. I didn't care how. I just wanted them to have it and hold it, and maybe it would help them. And honestly, looking back now with all the feedback I've gotten from people told me that that album helped them get through some of the hardest times of their life. And if I would have held that back, that's it's not to say that, oh, my music is going to save people. It's like, it's just more like art is, it's energy, and I couldn't hold it anymore. I needed to let the energy go, and I needed to make room in myself for the next thing. And I didn't want to live in that place anymore. So, COVID kind of fucked everybody's life up and took a lot of lives. And it's just like, it was a very dark time. And the only thing that I could think of that would be healing, which is always healing, is music. Music is the only thing that has gotten me through the worst times. So I just had to let her go.
yeah. There's a lot of albums that came out around that time that I think, if anything, people had something that they hadn't really had before, which is time to just sit and listen. And I think that's something that, I mean, for just a silver lining here during a horrendous time, would be that people actually got to spend time on some things that maybe they didn't make time for as much prior to
Yep.
that. So I think it's like for I think because for me, I can't speak for myself. I try whenever I can to carve out time to have an album experience because I'm cut from the old school cloth where I see albums almost as films or
Yeah.
novels, and so to me, there's nothing more joyous than sitting down with a nice pair of headphones and diving into an album, almost like I would dive into a good book
Yeah.
or a film. So to me, your record, that's around the time I was introduced to you, and that record in particular was my introduction to you. And I will say that go from that point forward, I was like, well, I'm locked into
Yeah.
and I think it's important to note that people continue to again support the artist because I think someone such as yourself is really delivering the goods. And that'll make leeway into my next question, which is how did you get yourself involved with a recent project from bassist Chuck Wright, who has a project he recently released called Sheltering Sky, and you feature on that record, and you did a fantastic track on there. How did you get involved in that?
So there's a thing that goes on here in Hollywood every Tuesday. It's called Ultimate Jam Night, and Chuck runs that. He's been running it for years, and somehow through the grapevine a couple of years ago, somebody let Chuck know about me, or Chuck found me somehow. I don't remember the exact story, but one of his teammates reached out to me and asked me to come and start performing at the Ultimate Jam Night, because they do like unrehearsed. Everybody shows up, they know what song they're singing, and everybody just gets up on the stage and sings. But they invite like some of the best guitarists and drummers and bass players from like all over, string players, backing vocalists, and it's kind of like a big gang. You know, everybody gets together, we all shoot the shit, and we and perform together, and we build community, and it's a lot of fun, you know. And I did it every so often, and it was cool because I got to cover songs that I normally would never cover. Like I did a Rush track, I did an Elton John song. I did. He asked me to, which was kind of kismet. Also, is that he asked me to do "Angel" by Sarah McLachlan, and he loves her and I love her, so we both share that commonality. And that was one of the first songs that I remember when I was little. I was trying to like do recordings of on my computer of me singing that, and so I have like these old crappy recordings of me trying to track vocals by myself when I was younger, and that was kind of cute. So that was a little bit surreal to like perform that one. And then yeah, we I did a bunch of other cool performances. We did a Spice Girls rendition. We got a whole bunch of girls together. It was just fun. It was like it's like fun for the community. And I think right as we shut down, maybe like a few months, either it was like a month or two in, that he emailed me and he reached out and he said that he had been working on some songs. At that point, I don't think he knew he was making a record yet. I think he just had a bunch of songs that he wanted to finally make, because now that he was not with Quiet Riot anymore, he just had all this time to like start working on his own material. And he's a brilliant writer, like incredible bass player. You'll hear him a lot on my next record. He's on a few songs too. So it's it was just started there. We started a friendship. We have a lot of the same musical influences. He's a huge Kate Bush fan, and so am I. We both love Bjork, and it's sort of funneled from there. He sent me a track. The first one he sent me was "Army of Me," and we did that cover. And then we started moving into "Time Waits for No One," and which we co-wrote together. And then he asked me to sing on "Giving Up the Ghost" because he wrote that track. And yeah, it was just great. Like we had so much fun, and he's fun to work with. He gives you freedom to run and play and be yourself, and he's not like an overlord, you know, which is important when you're collaborating with anyone in this industry. But I think it helps that we both think similarly. We have a very parallel sort of opinions when it comes to production and vocals and lyrics. So yeah, that was kind of how it just kind of evolved naturally. But I was shocked when he reached out, because like I didn't even know that he was working on or planning on working on his own stuff, you know, because I know him from seeing him over the years with Quiet Riot and with Alice Cooper and like, you know, all the other guys. So
Yeah,
that's
it's a
kind of how it funneled.
Giving Up the Ghost is fantastic, and your cover of "Army of Me" again fits your vocal attributes like a glove. So to me,
Thank
that's
you.
even so. And then if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit about Beauty and Chaos, I think that's also another
Ah,
important project that you've been involved in.
yes. Oh my gosh. So Michael, Michael and Michael. So Michael Ciravolo is the curator of Beauty and Chaos. He's the president of Schecter Guitars. And his partner, Michael Rosen, is the producer of Beauty and Chaos. So the two of them are just like, they're just like sonically brilliant. Like everything they make is just beautiful. And I remember when I first met Michael, we he sort of said to me, he's like, "Whitney, I want to work on a song with you at some point." And I was like, okay. And then he like sent me an email saying, "I see you going somewhere between Bauhaus and Bjork on this track." And I was like, okay, that's a wide range of influence there, but we'll figure it out. And lo and behold, like he sent me this song, and I just couldn't believe when I heard it, because it's like I have like a fond appreciation of trip hop music, and I love any sort of dark wave or goth rock. I'm a big Typo Negative fan. Like I just there's like a lot of stuff I can hear. Like he loves The Cure, and you can hear a lot of that influence in his work. And then he sent me the track, and I just started writing immediately because I was so inspired. I was like, I love these sounds. They're dark, and you know, being like an Alice in Chains fan, like I'm like always yearning for like dark tones and dark guitar work and strange chord progressions, and it's so that was kind of how that funneled to be. And it was very, again, very natural. We met through the scene, through a mutual band that we're both friends with. So yeah.
Yeah, believe the track's called Orion. It's wonderful. It's a great track.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't it's funny, like, when I first heard the song, I was thinking I was gonna do something, like, more ethereal and, like, soft, like, maybe, like, Cocteau Twins kind of approach, but then I felt like I was channeling more of, like, a Bowie sort of energy for that song. Like, I wanted it to feel more conversational and a little bit leaning into the groove a little bit more, and so I ended up, you know, immediately what I started thinking about, because I love anything to do with like cosmos and space and anything to do with time travel or any sort of weird stuff like that. Like, oh, I looked up. I was like researching like constellations, and when I was reading about Orion or the story of Orion, it's very interesting. And I'm an animal lover, and I thought I never heard this story before until I researched this. So apparently, like in ancient folklore, Orion was going to battle with constellation Taurus, and because Orion was trying to harm the animals of the earth, and Taurus was trying to stop him from doing such. And it reminded me of like kind of what's going on politically, socially, economically right now, where we're sort of up to battle with these egotistical, gaslighting, narcissistic people who just hurt whatever's pure, and they don't realize that the people that they're hurting, like if you put yourself in the position of the object of Orion, like the only way to get through that is to march on through it and not let your opponent see your weaknesses and your vulnerability, because they'll just prey on that, and it's the same thing in martial arts. Like the reason why some of the best martial artists are able to just take you down and you don't even know what's happening is because they're not giving you any sort of hint that they're scared or that they're in fear. And that was kind of how I've experienced my life, is like I've learned through different experiences that the only way out is through. And that means building a tough skin, but also I guess you could say mimicking your opponent so that they can't read you. They can't figure out how to hurt you anymore. And so you get the power back, you take the power back. And that was what Orion was about. And it started evolving into this very deep psychoanalytical analysis of like global and personal things that I had gone through.
Yeah, it's a fantastic song, and thanks for sharing that story. I think that's incredibly powerful. I was not
Thank you.
aware of that, and I'm also a freak fan of the cosmos and sci-fi and things involving that sort of,
Yeah.
zodiac signs and all that. So I don't want to get too caught up in that, but it's cool to
Yeah.
hear it. That's a fantastic story,
Thank
and
you.
it's something that we can, I think, all take a little bit from. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, going through your current musical journey, something tells me that you're going to be a genre fluid artist, in that there's not going to necessarily be a box that you're going to be placed in throughout the course of your career. It's going to be like, well, this is who I am for this record. This is this, and this is that era, and it's very true to where I am today. And it's almost like a postmark for that moment in time, and then you'll move forward to the next thing. And the thing that'll keep things intact to your identity is really going to just be your sense of songwriting. Certain things, quirks that you might carry in your
Yeah.
voice, and things that make you identifiable in that way. But I think you're going to be one of those artists that's going to be free to explore any music genre as you wish, when you wish. Am I wrong
Yeah.
about that?
Well, luckily you're right, because I
Mhm.
don't have a label that's telling me I have to be something that I'm not, or, basically placing a monetary value on the output of what I'm doing so that it limits what I can do. I think that, to be honest, I think the industry is trying to be genre fluid now. I think it's trying to lean into that. I mean, look at Demi Lovato. Look at her releasing a rock alternative album. Like no one saw that shit coming, but I think it's because a lot of artists are they're multifaceted, they have lots of skills, they're very talented, but when you start out really young, you're put in a box and you're told that that's the box you have to stay in. But I think artists are realizing now, and maybe the music industry is realizing, that you can't box music in. It has to just be it. You have to let art express itself through people, real people who have real stories and who have real influences, not just one influence. Like, I'm sure Demi Lovato doesn't have one influence. That woman has a ton of influences that have made her who she is today. And so I think that's really cool. I think that's cool that she's able to step into that skin. Hopefully it's her choice and it wasn't someone else's, you know what I mean? But um I don't know. I don't want to be boxed in. I don't even like the idea of genre, because my favorite artists defy that. They don't stay in that box. They, if anything, they're just like, we're here to make cool stuff, and it doesn't matter if it fits or checks off a box. David Bowie, I'll use this as an example. Like, one of my favorite movies as a kid was The Labyrinth, and me and my friend at a radio station used to joke about it. We used to tweet at each other all the time. You remind me of the babe. You remind me of the babe. And we would say that to each other on Twitter, like all the time. The babe with the power. That was like the thing that he would say to me all the time.
Magic dance, yeah.
And David Bowie's music in that movie, to this day, I throw it on a vinyl player and I don't know what the frick that is. It makes me feel amazing feelings. I am so inspired by it. But like, genre wise, what is that? Like, it could be you could say 5, 6 categories of what that could be. But I think that's what really influenced me at a young age, was that score to that record, because it was everything I wanted. It was dreamy, it was rock, it was groovy, it was badass, it had everything, and that's why I don't know, maybe I'll just keep continuing to make stuff that keeps surprising people, because music is supposed to keep shocking us and making us feel wonderful feelings. If you don't have anything to look forward to, if an artist keeps dropping the same sounding song over and over again, that's fine, but you have to keep growing. Like, a good example is Stone Temple Pilots. Like, I like them a lot, and their records, they're always the same people, but as their each record drops, it's a different experience and sonic adventure that they take you through, and it's still them, but they're growing. They're growing as a band. They're growing as a. I mean, the DeLeo brothers are just brilliant in my opinion, but like, it's just, you have to do that. You have to be yourself, but you have to keep growing as an artist and redefining the own box that you might have around yourself. And that's okay. That's an okay thing to do.
My apologies for grinning over here a little bit, but Stone Temple Pilots is one of my all-time favorite bands, and I always felt they were vastly misunderstood by their general audience, because there's the core audience, no pun intended, that loves the first two records, Core and Purple, and then there's
Yes.
the Beyonders, as I'll call them for now, that it's from Tiny Music. It's Tiny
Yep.
Music #4 and Shangri La Di Da, which to me that's my STP, is when they began to blend in psychedelia and shoegaze and
Yes.
bossa nova music with a song like "And So I Know" off of Tiny Music.
Yes.
So I go deep with the STP catalog, and Scott Weiland, to me, his birthday was just a couple days ago. I mean,
Yeah.
a wonderful melody maker, lyricist. I think, again, vastly underrated. A vocal
Yep.
chameleon who was very Bowie inspired.
Yes.
As far as like changing his voice, and that was his all-time hero too. So you can hear it,
Yeah.
especially on those later records. But
Yep.
great. I'm
Yep.
glad you mentioned them, because I continue to champion their later work whenever I can.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing to see. And I think there are a lot more bands that are like that are under the radar, that are doing the same thing. But that actually helps you get closer to having a sound, is by journeying through all these different pathways, because what ends up happening is, at the end of that journey, or not the end, but like when you start to reach that cataclysm of what you're trying to achieve as an artist, I think that is when you start to discover, oh, that's why I do this. Oh, that's why I make this choice. Oh, that's why, this song, sounds like that. It's like you start to realize your patterns as an artist. And I think through going to different styles and genres and jumping around, it just helps you to hone in on what it is you want to make. Because I think as an artist, most artists have so many passions and so many influence and so many likes that it takes years to figure out what it is that makes you you, you know, that isn't the you that is influenced by such and such, but just the you that has formed because of years of chiseling away at your own voice, you know. And that's why I love STP, because I think they constantly do it. Even the new record without Scott, I thought was really emotional, because it was almost like an homage to Scott's memory, because and the production on that album was beautiful. It was almost like you know, it was almost like similar to the Dark Side of the Moon production. It was like soft and floaty, and I don't know, it's a very Parsons style
Yeah.
production level. And
Perdida is the name of the record,
Perdita,
and
yeah,
again, I think it's a highlight of their career. I agree with you on that.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
that's a winter record for me. I put that on like on a cold like winter day
yeah.
or something, and just like space like hot cup of coffee or whatever, and just
Yep,
relax to
yep,
that record. But I like to ask this of all newer artists, and in conclusion here, as far as like where do you see yourself in the current? And we kind of touched upon some of the keystones of the question I'm about to ask you, but where do you find yourself in the current musical landscape? Because I know like it's weird, and I believe we're in a transitional period that we still haven't really gotten a grip as to what it will become eventually. But for newer artists, there's so many different levels of showcasing yourself through social media,
yeah,
and there's Bandcamp if you want to buy music. I believe in buying music or merchandise, because to me, outside of touring, that's how artists do make their money that they spend on recording. Obviously, it's a little bit it's not as expensive anymore. You don't have to spend money in a recording studio anymore, but I think it's important to support artists. And where do you see yourself in the grand scheme of things in the current environment? And what keeps you going forward? I'm pretty sure you pretty much touched on some of that already, but as an artist, what is that for you?
um you know, it's funny, in my later years now, like of doing this for some time, I've really enjoyed the process of being in the studio and writing and producing and getting my feet into more of the production side of things. And I find that in the current music landscape right now, I would probably say that like my goal is to continue to put out releases or records that allow me to get closer to my fans. You know, I want to keep finding new ways to reach my fans so that I could go to other countries and travel and be able to share that experience of the albums I'm creating with them. And since I still consider myself a new artist, I, you know, my first record was 2015. 2020 was my second debut. It's still very new, and then we shut down. And so I feel like it's almost like you're given a second chance now. It's like things are opening up again, and like we're back to. It's almost like you just deleted like like 2 years, like. But in a way, it wasn't a deletion, because I was able to write a whole other record with someone in that time. So it was a beautiful thing. So I'm staying very grassroots in my approach to focusing on just putting out really good quality music that is true to myself as an artist. And you know, I want to tour. That's something I want to do. I want to get out there and tour. I want to be able to write, you know, co-write with people that I admire, and continue to push my own boundaries of what I thought I was capable of doing. I think that's growth is probably my goal right now. I just want to keep growing and learning and absorbing and pushing myself as much as I can into uncomfortable situations, because it's only through that thus far that has gotten me here, is just making myself continuously uncomfortable. But that's okay. And, you know, I hope that like the new chapter of what I'm doing now speaks to people, old and new fans alike. Because I think this is a little bit more stripped back. I'm going to say like these new tracks that I'm working on are it's a little it's kind of it's slipping away from a little bit more of the electro and going more into the alternative area, which is some of my biggest influences as a musician. And so that I'm really excited for. It's a very rich record full of lushness and cool players and interesting journeys. And I'm personally excited about what's next, and being able to put this record out and just showcase a whole other side of myself again. So,
It sounds to me like you're a big believer in the album experience too. You like putting together the sequencing matters to you and what track follows which and whatnot, and
yeah.
you put a lot of work into that. Is the album a meaningful thing for you
Yes.
as far as like the
I'm
craft of creating that experience for a listener?
experiencing albums and making that experience is very important to me. I also love concept albums. I mean, I've been listening to albums as a whole my whole life, like, so when you put on a record like Rubber Soul or Sergeant Pepper's Only Hearts Club, and you listen to that from top to bottom, and you're like, holy crap, like the intention and the and the the thought process that went into making this track listing give you an experience like a roller coaster, like all the way through. Dark Side of the Moon. I'll just throw out these ones because they were my earliest ones. When I was little, the Rumors album. It's like there's just all these records that are, to me, are concept records that have a style and a mood and a feeling, and they're talking about a specific set of ideas. And because I am a writer, that's important to me. And language is not just words, it's sounds, it's pictures, it's visuals, and those albums did that for me. And I want to be able to make those myself because I like creating experiences. It's why I was a designer for so long, because I was creating visual experiences and spaces for people to perceive the world through. And that's what music is. It's just another three-dimensional form of experience.
I have to say we need more artists out there, such as yourself, out there doing what they do best. Because I uh, I think it's important to see people. I mean, the sophistication you carry in your work and what you do and how you hold yourself up to me. That to me is something that is still very refreshing today to see that, because a lot of the artists I grew up on, there's even a pop song, if you want to call it that, there was work put into the songwriting and work put into the album concept, and everything felt very of a higher degree than everything else. So it's cool to
Yeah.
see artists out there when you can find them who are continuing that in some way. And to me, you're one of those artists right now who's delivering, a high pedigree of sophisticated, well-made music with integrity put into it. So I have to
Well,
send you my thanks for that. I mean, it's just like you got to be thankful, because there's not, to me, there's not enough of it, and those that are doing it maybe aren't getting enough praise for it. So one of my reasons for doing this is to create some sort of fanfare and praise through a grassroots way, of course,
yeah.
um, to promote these artists, because I got sick and tired of waiting on the sidelines. And I mean, there's a whole world out
Yeah.
there that, just because there's so much going on now, they need filters or gatekeepers. Back in the day, you had, MTV when they played music videos, or you had radio DJs on
Yep.
terrestrial radio that actually got to play whatever they wanted to play and introduce people to artists that they actually enjoyed listening to, young and
Yeah.
old. So we need to bring that back. And so I'm not saying I'm that, but I'd love to be a part of that, as far as promoting artists that I feel have that
Yeah.
higher tier of quality in their work. So again, thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate your words, and it's nice to chat with someone who just genuinely loves music and cares about the arts. So what you are doing is leaning into what you just said. You're creating a space for people to just to spread their wings and kind of share that information globally, and that's a very powerful tool. So
Yeah, the word that comes to mind too is appreciation. I think that when you love something, you should show your appreciation for it in some way. And I think that that it's important to show again, it's to me, music is everything. So I think
Yeah.
it's important that we share that. But Whitney Tai, the best. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with me. Um, After months of discussion, it really was worth really was worth it. And you always have an open seat here on Sonic Dorms. To me, you're definitely one of like the flagship artists that will continue to promote on
Wow.
here.
Thank
And
you.
all the best to you and your musical journey. I know you're going to go far. Can't wait to hear what's next. And for anybody who hasn't checked out your work, I think they should. Just if you wouldn't mind mentioning, where can people find you, whether it be to purchase your music, listen to your music, or just discover you, generally speaking.
It was an honor to speak with you today. You're a wonderfully eloquently spoken gentleman, and I really appreciate this time you're giving me. You can find me at whitneytaimusic.com, Twitter at Whitney Tai, Instagram at Whitney Tai. Um, it's most my website will link you to basically all my platforms. So if you're unsure of where to find me from there, I would just say start at my website. I've got everything up there from my songs to social media links to music videos, so you can check out what we're doing there. Sign up to my newsletter because I often will send out newsletters of what's going on or what's coming up too.
Wonderful. And is there a tentative release date yet for when we could expect to hear even a first taste of what's next on the next record from you?
Um, I could loosely say we can say mid to early to mid next year, but there's no set date right now. It's really going to be dependent on a few factors outside of the music. So we're shopping some of these songs and we're trying to figure out where we want to take this record. So we'll see. It's the next chapter. I'm more just excited to kind of build the experience around this record, which might take a little extra time because I have a very succinct vision of what I want the visual story to be to suit the music. So that's something I'm working on now.
Got it. Well, best wishes. I can't wait to hear it. Again, you're
Thank
open to
you.
coming back on when the record comes out. I can't wait to talk about it and
Thank you.
just go track by track and really take a deep dive on everything on the
Cool.
record. But
Nice.
all the best to you, and until next time, Whitney. Thank you so
Yes,
much for
thank you
doing this
so
with me.
much. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.